So yeah, this is my presentation here. It's normally a much longer presentation, so I'm going to try to condense it down in 30 minutes and without trying to speak too fast so that people can understand me. If I do start speaking too fast, just hold your hand up and let me know. So yeah, my name's Kevin and I hunt wireless, and this is one of the maps from Wiggle. If you've never seen Wiggle, you can go to wiggle.net, and it's, by the way, with 1G, not 2Gs. And this is it's actually not the most recent update, but you kind of can get an idea. And I'll come back to explain some of this because I know I've not actually been in Iraq, but I know where Wi-Fi access points in Iraq are. And I'm going to explain how I do this. So yeah, there's a few names I go by. One of the funniest ones is quick turn off your wireless. The other one I forgot to put on here was sometimes when I walk into a bar, I hear people say, "Oh, it's too late. We can see him." So yeah, so I've been doing as war roaming actually since I got my start. I had just been wrapped up about a year's worth of talks on Lotus Notes security, and I returned back to DEF CON. I think it was 2002, and I saw a presentation on Wi-Fi, and I got the bug, and I started poking around at Wi-Fi, learning more about it. And 2000 later that year, I had another friend of mine, Chris Goggins, come over and do a Wi-Fi penetration test or assessment, for the phone company I was working for. And we drove all around the Netherlands hunting out Wi-Fi rogue access points on our network. And that's really when I got the bug and needed to do more. And so I've been doing it anonymously on Wiggle for up to around 2011. And then in 2011, a few things changed. Wiggle came out with a application for Android. And some of my colleagues at the phone company I was working at got all excited because now they could participate too. They knew I was doing this and they could do it from their Android phone. And so they pushed me into actually moving out of the anonymous space because you can contribute data sets anonymously to Wiggle and actually register a username and join their group, which I did. And later they quit playing with me just because they couldn't keep up with me. So, but yeah, this is actually a few pictures from those times. This is actually at my office and the backpack and the laptop I was using around back then. And various different tools I was using at the time. A lot of people ask why I do this. So this is a relative, I think a very, relative question to today, because I hear sometimes a lot of people are like, I thought that was dead. I thought that was a dead hobby. And I'm like, there's more Wi-Fi out there. The density of Wi-Fi out there that I see today is just completely off the charts. And so I think it's actually a very important thing because everything is embedded in Wi-Fi, has some sort of Wi-Fi embedded. Everything, not just your laptops, not just your mobile phone, your home automation, light switches have Wi-Fi embedded into them. You can get some really great little ESP-based light switches and smart electrical sockets, and they've got ESP chips in them, and they have Wi-Fi in them. I've got an aquarium system that uses a lot of Wi-Fi, nothing for super mission critical stuff, but for collecting information and things like this, I do have to employ it for some of the devices I use. And it's also really a lot of fun. A lot of people like to play Pokemon on their smartphone, and that kind of took over the Netherlands recently. And for me, this is sort of like Pokemon on steroids or something like train spotting, but just the next generation. By the way, this picture I captured of this couple, this was in Den Haag Central Station. And I just given this version of this talk, an earlier version of this talk at SurfNet in Utrecht. And I was coming back home and just got off the tram and I thought, well, I'll just stop and hang out in the station and collect some Wi-Fi for about 5 minutes before I head on home. And this couple was up there tram spotting. So they were actually spotting trams, not the trains. And I talked to him for a few minutes, and he actually had a obsession for the taking pictures of all the trams. He had quite a colorful jacket too. But I started to explain to him, hey, I'm kind of like you, but with something different. But I figured he probably wouldn't understand. It would take too long, and I might actually scare him. So I let him be. I just thought they were a really cute couple. But yeah, I also blame my father for this. My father was electrical two-way radio engineer in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s for Motorola. And so he taught me a lot about the RF spectrum and ham radio technology. He was building Tesla coils and things like this. And ever since then, I've always had this passion for understanding all what's around us in terms of wavelengths and everything else, RFID, ADSB. I've got an ADSB Raspberry Pi in my attic. The antenna actually works really well, and I made it out of a coat hanger. I cut it to the specific lengths, and there was a lot of trial and error. But I can, on the right weather day, the days with the right weather, I can actually pick up airplanes almost right up to the shore of the UK. Generally, on average, I can only get about halfway across, but I like to watch and also listen to the airplane communications and watch them tracking. And anytime my wife, as she often flies to other European countries for her jobs, whenever the plane flies over our house, I go out with a huge 600 millimeter lens and take a picture of her plane, and I go, here's a picture of you, honey. So I have some fun with it. It's also interesting because we have a roof terrace and we like to watch sunsets, and somebody will say, hey, I wonder what that plane is, where's that coming from? And I go, oh, here, I can tell you. So I do this on several spectrums, no pun intended. And more specific to Wi-Fi and GSM and Bluetooth and the frequencies I've been really passionate about the last few years. It's wireless surveying. And this is something that from a professional standpoint has really also experienced doing this as a hobby has lent itself very well to my career working in security and working for GSM telcos. We even had a situation where it was unbelievable. We had one of the telcos I was at actually had problems with their Wi-Fi. And when the Wi-Fi inside all the retail branches all around the Netherlands. And I ended up when a lot of other third-party vendors and specialist vendors couldn't figure out why we were having such crappy Wi-Fi in the retail shops. And it was a real pain point for our customers. Eventually somebody goes, hey, we have this guy who's sort of obsessive compulsive about Wi-Fi, so maybe we should go talk to him. And that actually worked out really nice because I got to literally ride my bike around the Netherlands and go measure Wi-Fi, and it was really awesome. And I figured out the problem in about 2 weeks, where Telindus and some other companies they worked on it for months and they couldn't figure out what the problems were. And a lot of that comes back with experience of doing a lot of these I call it war roaming, but it's quite technically it's wireless surveying. And there's a lot of other things in security that are related about it that you can figure out. I've also have something kind of like I'm running Kesmet as an intrusion detection system on my home for both wireless security and a little bit of physical security. And the idea being that if an alarm event happens, I literally snapshot all the wireless frequencies for forensics information. So if somebody were to break in and even if they're using a burner phone or their real phone, I'll have a fingerprint of all their electronic devices. And I figure that would be useful for the police. And it's something that I also help cooperate with the police a lot on. And I've been approached by the police in the past to help with certain wireless investigations and criminal defense lawyers. And it's also a lot of fun. There's a lot more out there. Zigbee, Z-Wave. I have some of these products at my home, but I also like to hack them and see what's possible. As far as just collecting the data, there's a lot of places where you can do something interesting with the data to contribute back to our community. And there's wiggle.net, there's the Open Cell ID project, and we may even start something for Zigbee called ziggle.net. Adam went ahead and registered the domain, and he's been doing all the Zigbee stuff, and he sent me a killer bee to play with. And I said, hey, why don't we build a Wiggle website for Zigbee? So he, without even hesitation, 2 minutes later, he came back. He said, okay, domain's registered. I was like, wow, okay. So I guess now we have to do something. So stay tuned there. Maybe we will actually get something up online. Excuse me. So I mentioned there's a lot of professional opportunities I found, and one of the more interesting ones I'll come back to talk about in a minute. It's been working for some Dutch lawyers here and actually giving forensics and evidence, because I left T-Mobile in 2016, and I've been doing forensics for different clients, and one of them was the lawyer Jeroen Pin, who's kind of well known in the security and privacy aspect of criminal and privacy law. But there's a lot of other opportunities out there. Apple is literally doing this. If you have an iOS device, they're doing this every day from your mobile phone, and they're collecting the data. So is Google. And so we don't really know what they're all doing with this data. They don't let us see it. So my idea is, well, we should do it too and see what they're actually seeing. There's also some interesting things, and there may be interesting opportunities in the future in regards to the GDPR. And because it seems that everyone has a slightly different opinion on the GDPR. And I think that will be something interesting that will develop in the next couple of years. Where does the privacy law actually lay in regards to Wi-Fi? But I won't get into that. I'll try to keep this a little bit more technical. So yeah, these are the tools of my trade. I do have, if you come by the wireless hacking village, I have my tools on display. I went ahead and left them down there, and hopefully there's somebody's watching them to keep them secure. And but I've got one that I had built. It's a little black box. It was one of sometimes I start off calling it the football, because the idea was it's supposed to really work like an iPod and just be really quick and easy to fire up and run off. Then I really built what was like a Swiss Army knife, and that was really specifically built so I could hot swap out any combination of 4 different wireless types of cards, SDRs, GSM dongles, and this type of stuff. I've ended up building, I believe I've yet to find anyone to contradict me over the last year. I think it's the first Raspberry Pi or even SBC-based GSM stumbler. Then it doesn't require an SDR. You can actually use 2G, 3G, and 4G GSM dongles on it, which kind of makes if you want to get into finding base stations, it creates a very low barrier to get started. You could do it with SDRs, but one of the reasons I chose to use dongles is because I had to use it for submitting evidence to the Dutch court, and I figured, for having a technical bar of submission of evidence, just using commercial dongles, just like the police do in their investigation, it eliminated a whole lot of, are you doing funny things with SDR data and things like that. So I stuck with that, and it's extremely effective, far, far more effective than running an app on your smartphone. As I mentioned, this is I already mentioned this, but this is a little bit of my timeline. I've obviously been doing this for quite a while, and only been really recently talking about this. And one of the things I want to talk about, because I hear back since the first talk I gave on this, and talking in the community, there's a lot of people who've tried to build Raspberry Pis. They kind of get them working, Raspberry Pi war roamers. They kind of get them working, but they complain that they're not stable. So they go off and they buy a Pineapple. And the Pineapples are a nice learning tool. They come already pre-made with some of the software and everything. But if you've ever been to DEF CON and for a period of time going to that, if you show up with a unhardened Pineapple stock bought directly, right, if you buy it from Hack5 and then go to DEF CON with your Pineapple thinking you're going to do something fun, you're actually going to become the guinea pig for everybody else, because you will find your Pineapple hacked pretty quick. So this is why I'm not really keen on Pineapples, and I think it's also a better learning opportunity for others as well, to build a Raspberry Pi or another SBC, could be BeagleBone, but I think it's better to build it yourself and understand what's really going into it. And I'm also going to share some of the things of what to do and what not to do. Please don't use duct tape. It doesn't hold it together, and I'll come back on this why duct tape? So, it'll get you through for a 5-minute quick assessment, but if you really want to do this as a hobby, you need to think a little bit about making it more durable. Also, what I don't want. Props to Dark Matter. I don't know him personally, but I know a lot of other people. A lot of my friends actually know him, and apparently he's a really nice guy. I believe it was just a stunt, kind of. I also heard some other things I'll mention in a minute, but I really don't want this. I'm 51 years old, and I don't want to be lugging around this type of weight. And I also wanted something very discreet. And I would this, particularly with my looks, I think I would scare everyone from airport security, just the general police, if I was walking around town with this. And I actually do take the devices I have through airport security, usually without problem. I think the funniest stories I had came from when I went to India with them. But I've heard he's had a lot more trouble through airport security than I have had. So yeah, as I've mentioned, I do have respect for Dark Matter. It's nothing personal against him. I just don't think that this was a very practical build. Now, I will say everybody who is on Wiggle and is a war roamer and who's probably in the top 50, when he came across our news feed, or if we were at DEF CON and saw him in person, we probably thought, oh shit, this guy is going to cream us on the Wiggle charts. We've got real problems now. And I did too. I was busy building the device I called Gremlin. I had just assembled it, and I looked at that. It was kind of like, I looked at the Wi-Fi cactus, and it was kind of like, it was hard not to look at it. It was like a kick in the gut. But one of the things I started thinking about, it's not a very practical device, and you really don't need that many antennas unless you're moving at 120 kilometers an hour. And still then, and I'll get to it in a minute, but it's still not going to benefit you like the way you think it might. Now I do agree with him. Wiggle, he gave a cool presentation, Wiggle like you mean it. And I've definitely been wiggling like I mean it for the last 15 plus years. But I strongly believe in this, that if you have a 2 antenna interface, Raspberry Pi or BeagleBone, and you use it every day, you are going to leave Dark Matter, who uses his Wi-Fi cactus maybe once a month. You'll leave him in the dust. Because you're constantly out there gathering new data. And if he fires up his machine, on a blog post I saw of his, I heard it cores out after he's tracking around 14,000 devices. And I've done a lot of optimizations into my Raspberry Pi builds and software and hardware. And I know I can go to a festival or something like this and discover more than 85,000 SSIDs. So I think that, and yeah, on a daily basis, I average around 20 to 30,000 devices. And this is just a screenshot of one of my many uploads. And because there's several files, I had to do a little bit of, I highlighted the relevant contribution or the numbers, and add them up there. And that day it came up to 33,955. And yesterday, I'll come to that in a minute, but I actually logged over 100,000 here yesterday at the conference. And I think other people can do this too. You can certainly start, and I encourage you, if you've never ever war roamed, go to the Android store. If you have an Android phone, I'm sorry, there's no option for iOS. Boo, Apple. But for Android, you can actually download an app and come along and get started with that. And it's the Wiggle app, and start running it now at the conference and have some fun and learn how it works. If you've already built a Raspberry Pi, but you've had problems, I hope to address here in a few minutes. Some of the problems, if you've had particular problems, I hope to maybe give some contributions to help you with that. And by the way, this is just sort of the proof in the pudding, because it's very easy to claim things. But this is a screenshot from, let's see, what was the numbers? So this is when I was at 4.5 million. I'm actually at 5 million now. So this is literally just about a month ago or so. But this is when I was at 4.5 million. And this I grabbed just this morning. So at least for Dark Matter, I gave more of a recent update of a screenshot. He's still at number 399 on the Wiggle charts. And the interesting the way you read these, this is the column here of all the discovered Wi-Fi, the ones where nobody else has ever seen it, but dark matter in this case actually has, to his credit, 247,000 discovered Wi-Fi. This column over here is the column where he's all the Wi-Fi he's ever seen. Maybe it was discovered by somebody else, but he also saw it too. So there is a tally for that. But the most important one is the one he discovered. That's where all the guys, that's the number on this column where everybody on Wiggle competes. And so he's had the Wi-Fi cactus for more than 2 years, and he's only tallied around 200,000. And like I said yesterday, I scored around 100,000 in just one day. And I only have 6 wireless interfaces on my 2 devices. And that's across the 2 devices. So how do I do this? So this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about. I really encourage, my idea when I started doing this, when I really upped my game in 2015, was in order to be successful at this, I really need to reconsider what the tools I was using. I had previously been using laptops. And I wanted the new Raspberry Pis with the 4 cores had come out. And I thought, okay, now the Pi is becoming a mature platform. We can actually do something with this. And I experimented with running 3 Wi-Fi off of a single Pi. And it was a little bit of a stability issues, but I did a lot of research to try to figure out where was the optimal balance. But my idea was also that it should really basically be easier than an iPod, so I could incorporate it into my daily life and adapt the technology to my life, and rather than me adapting my life to the technology. And so this is one of the things that I actually spent several months actually doing. Excuse me. And that's what I encourage everyone else to do too. If you're actually having to spend 30 minutes to fire up your Raspberry Pi and test it and get it working before you go out, you're not going to end up using it over the long haul. I mean, you really should be able to just press one button, throw it in your bag, and go. And that's really what I've done. So also for WarPi and technical requirements, you really have to give consideration on the wireless network interfaces. Choosing the right wireless networking interfaces makes all the difference in the world. You also need to have a very reliable GPS. It's not worth anything if you go out and any of these components actually fail. I also had one of my technical requirements, liquid-filled USB storage for fun at airport security. I don't really recommend that, but it can be kind of funny sometimes. And I also chose no fans because the fans suck. And also, I don't recommend using any type of display on the Raspberry Pi. You use something to remote into it, a tablet, your phone, because displays also suck power. And as I was saying, if you don't have RF monitor mode, which is you really have to look and choose your if you use a non-alpha network card. And they are a vendor, by the way, then you really need to investigate. Most of the alpha network cards support RF mon, but not all of them. So you still have to double check it. And if you're not familiar with what RF mon is, you actually have like 6 different modes of operation in your wireless network interface. And, oops, sorry. The RF mon mode is the mode what actually your Wi-Fi interface is completely silent, and all it does is listen. And it listens to all the broadcasts from the access point and all the broadcasts from the client. And this mode is how people are able to find if you have a stealth or cloaked Wi-Fi access point. This is how they're able to find it. If you don't have this mode, you can't find the stealth mode, and you can't find sometimes the broadcasts from the clients, which tell you about the access points that they're trying to contact or are already talking to. This is an important thing, and although I do sometimes call this an advanced talk on war roaming, it's advanced because nobody's doing the basic stuff. Sometimes I find I get a lot of people saying, "Yeah, my Pi keeps crashing. I try to run, stick two Wi-Fi interfaces on it, and it just cores out. I don't understand after 30 minutes." Or while I'm walking around town, it freezes up and panics. Your cables probably suck, and I'm not talking just the connector. Or if you've bought cables that say they're heavy duty or something like this, you really need to get an electrical USB tester and really qualify your cables before you start using them. The Raspberry Pi is extremely dependent on very stable power supply. And if your connector is loose on either your Wi-Fi NIC, you can literally lose a Wi-Fi network interface, or the battery can cause the kernel panics to actually happen. So you really have to pay attention to this. And the tip that I recommend on the free tip on that is the Samsung cables that come with Samsung mobile phones seem to be some of the best out there. And also some of their aftermarket ones they're certainly better than anything you'll buy at MediaMarkt that claims to be heavy duty. Most of the heavy duty ones just have extra plastic insulation in them. So I'm looking at the time. I need to skip on through real quickly. This is Gizmo. You can come by and see him. I've really made him so I literally can control him with the Apple infrared mini remote, and he's been extremely effective. He also works together with Gremlin, so I can use either device. If I'm just going out to the store, to the market for 30 minutes, I'll take Gizmo because he's so small and I can still have room for groceries. But if I'm out in a long haul, I'll take Gremlin with me too. Both of these devices are capable of working with each other. And I've tuned the interfaces between the two of them to work cooperatively together or separately. And by that, I actually mean literally tuning into how many channels and which ones they spend the most time on. And another free tip to do this, go to Wiggle and look in the country where you're going to be war roaming and find what are the most popular used channels in your area and adjust your war roaming equipment to spend most of the time on those channels. And you can actually optimize your performance this way. The other thing that they do is all my devices that I've been playing with, they also share GPS data using GPSD, even though each one of them has their own chip. This way, if one of them loses GPS lock, they can grab GPS data from the other one, from one of the other Pis. So this is basically what I was saying earlier. Why use 2 or 4 when you can optimize for 6 antennas? In my case, this is what I've done. And I prioritize 1, 6, and 11 channels on 2 antennas, and all the other frequencies are spread across the other 4 antennas. And so this has really upped my performance game on when I go out and I'm able to get 30,000 SSIDs in the space of an hour. And just as proof in the pudding, this is the city of The Hague, and this is my coverage map. I've done all of this. I've been on every street, sidewalk, and bicycle path in The Hague. And even more, this is me all across the Netherlands. These are all my personal war roams. And, that's not my map, but that's an idea. If you want to know about the Wi-Fi density across the Netherlands, that's what it looks like. And so there's a whole lot more out there that still hasn't been discovered. This one I'm going to have to kind of skip. This way I had wanted to do a talk on this, but it wasn't accepted, but I thought I'd just leave a few of these slides in here. I did build a GSM stumbler, and this is Spike, and I wrote the software. I'll be releasing it this summer. I wrote it in Python, and I call it Hedy GSM after Hedy Lamarr, because without her, she was an awesome woman, and we probably wouldn't be doing all the wireless stuff we're all doing these days. But it's capable of running up to four different GSM dongles in it. And it's a runtime of 10 hours. And it actually can go longer because I figured out how to do a little bit of primitive power management through the USB ports by shutting down USB ports when the device isn't moving for more than 15 minutes. And that's the manual for how Heady GSM works. There's 4 commands. It's compatible with Wiggle and OpenCell ID. And yeah, that's the GUI on it. So I have different screen for every mobile network that it's actually on, and it just performs the same thing as like the Nokia Net Monitor from the days of old. But it does it for 2G, 3G, and 4G, and logs all the GPS data. And yeah, the brief mention, the presentation will be online, so you can go back and read this. That was sort of a documentation of also because my performance numbers on GSM on Wiggle started going up. I see I'm out of time, but I'll just show you the last. That's the GSM map of different base stations. And the interesting thing here is how much our modern smartphones are hopping between base stations these days, which is far different than how it used to be 15 years ago. So I'm out of time. I hope at least it was somewhat informative and useful to your future efforts and exploits in wireless if you decide to go this way, and I really encourage it. And I'm available to come chat with at the Wireless Hacking Village, and we can talk more about it. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing all your projects into the stage.